Have you ever wondered what it might be like to roast coffee for a living? Well, I'm a home coffee roaster, and I had a recent experience that gave me a taste of what that might be like, and I learned a few things, and I want to share those with you right now, so stick around. All right, thank you for joining me today, and welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. Recently, I had the opportunity to roast 18 kilos of coffee. It's about 40 pounds of coffee for somebody that we knew that is a nonprofit that wanted to give out gifts to some of their friends, some of the people that they know that support them, and they wanted to do that with the coffee that we roasted. And so we said we would be willing to give it a try. We bought a Guatemalan coffee and we did a test roast, more or less the profile of the coffee that would be given to all of these people. We gave it to the client. So they were able to try it, test it out. They said it was some of the best coffee they've ever had. They liked the coffee. And so our job was to be able to repeat that so that their friends or associates that they're giving this coffee out to would experience and be tasting the same coffee. That was our job, and I want to share with you about that experience. But first, I want to talk to you about the terminology production roasting, and I want to answer the question soon in this video here of why this would even be something that would be relevant or important to a home coffee roaster. So first, a production coffee roaster is somebody who is roasting coffee in a repetitive way over and over, the same coffee. Somebody has created a profile, whether it's the roast master, whether it's the owner of the cafe, or maybe a client. If you're reselling the coffee, they have a certain profile that they want, and you have got this in front of you, and your job is to take that profile and to repeat it over and over and over. And you need to do this consistently over a period of time. So this might be a coffee that is your main coffee that you're going to sell or give out to friends, and you want it to be the same. The coffee you roast today, the coffee you roast tomorrow, how do you do that? Well, a production roaster has to be aware of their environmental settings, the temperature in the room, the roaster settings, as well as the batch size. There's so many different variables, and the more consistency you have, the better chance you're going to have to be able to replicate that roast. That was something that my son and I had to do when we did this project for this nonprofit. If I fail to mention my son, he and I did this together, Michael. He's been on some of my other videos. We had a great time doing this. It was a great learning experience. And when it came to repeatability, we learned a few things. First, for large production roasters, they're dealing with larger equipment, larger machinery, roasters. And they're larger batch sizes too. And so that gives them a little bit of an advantage when it comes to consistency. Imagine a Ferrari or like a small sports car versus a semi-truck. So a small sports car can be nimble, it can make adjustments and move around quick, but the semi has inertia, it has mass, and so it's on track, and it stays on track easier than a real small coffee roaster might be. There's more mass, more heated coffee that is harder to sway into a different direction. That's a good thing and a bad thing. It's great for consistency, but if there needs to be adjustments, there's little room for error on a large batch. So we have a small 500 gram roaster here. It was 38 roasts that we did. Out of the 38 roasts, 2 of them were roasts that we didn't want to include in the coffee that we were providing to this person. So we ended up giving that away or drinking that ourselves. It wasn't bad, but it didn't fit the profile. So 36 roasts were good roasts, and the profiles were really close. We did a great job replicating. There were some variations, but they weren't variations enough to alter the flavor of the coffee in a significant way. When we roasted the coffee, we roasted them in batches, like 10 roast batches. We mixed all that coffee together, and then we would bag that coffee. All right, so a production roaster has to do all of this, and they have to be able to repeat it every week with the coffee that they get. So that's what a production roaster does. They're concerned about quality, repeatability, consistency, all of these things, because they want their client to have the same experience over and over and over. Whether it's on Monday or whether it's a year from Monday, they want them to have the same experience with that same coffee. And they can do that. The production roaster should be able to do that as long as they have their equipment set up properly. So why is this important to a home coffee roaster? Why is this relevant to you guys? Some of you have come right out and told me that you want to sell your coffee, or you're interested in learning how to do this to sell coffee as kind of a side gig for some extra income. There are a few that want to make it an actual profession, open up some cafes, and that's great. And so you're going to enter this world of production coffee roasting with my friend Trevor, who was on the channel with the video I did on from home roaster to cafe owner. I'll put a link up here for you to check that out. He started out on a Beamore, and that was his production roast. He had a recipe that he had set up for a certain type of coffee, and he would do that over and over and over. And then eventually now I think he's got a cafe, and he's got a 12-kilo roaster that he is working on, and he's roasting hundreds and hundreds of pounds of coffee every week. So the guy, he's doing pretty good. But he is living the life of production roasting. They have to be able to repeat that for their customers so that every time they come in and get that certain coffee, it's the same. All right, so when Michael and I went ahead and set this up, we had a roasting environment where every roast charge temperature was about 386 degrees. It varied a degree or two. The exhaust temperature was 425 degrees. We had a few instances where it was higher, and we had to compensate for that. Also, we had a recipe we were following, so we knew that from the time the roast started, the gas would be off for the first 35 seconds. After that, we would have a gas setting of 1 kPa on my roaster. That went all the way up to about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then we would start to make adjustments to the heat, preparing us for our transition from dry end into the browning phase. We would call yellow around 5 minutes, and then our target was 4-minute browning phase, or some you call it a Maillard phase. And 4 minutes during that time, we would want to get our rate of rise down to about 12 for a rate of rise was our target at first crack. And then that would allow us to get a nice development, usually around 16 or 17%, with a drop temperature around 400 degrees. I think on this one here it's 399.4 on the one graph. The other one I think is 400. Most of them were within a degree, and we end up with a fairly consistent coffee. And when we mix it all together, you wouldn't know the difference. So that's how we set up our roast. That's how we managed to get consistency, was to be able to follow a recipe and also have our settings be the same when we would start our roast. And we did that time after time after time. If I took all of our roasts and laid these down, as you can see, there's going to be some variation. The phase percentages are going to be close. The slope is going to be very similar. The total roast time is going to be very similar. And the end result is a fairly consistent cup of coffee. And that's important for a home coffee roaster who's looking to enter that world. But it's even more important for the home coffee roaster who might not want to do this for a living, but wants to learn more about their roaster, or wants to understand a little bit more about how to be consistent with their roasts. Have you ever had a golden roast? I call it that. That's where this coffee that you have is fantastic. You roasted this coffee and it's unbelievable. Now you've still got 3 or 4 more pounds of this coffee left and you want to be able to repeat it, and you're not sure how you're going to do that. Was it dumb luck? Was it that all of everything went into alignment and everything was perfect? Or whether it was you referencing your notes, following a line in an artisan profile, or whatever it is. Some of you have automated roasters. Some of the Bullet is a roaster that you can have set up. Same with the Hot Top, I think, where it can repeat a roast profile or duplicate that, follow it. That's a great thing to be able to do. But if you're roasting manually, and I would recommend you try, you Bullet people and Hot Top people, I'd recommend that you try doing that in manual mode and see how that works. But going through that exercise and then giving that coffee away to people is it's a learning experience. Again, you'll learn more about your roaster, its ability to be able to repeat a profile, your skill level, and where you should be practicing, whether it's anticipating different events and what's going to happen and how you should be altering your gas or your electric, your energy, or your airflow, whatever those things are that you would want to adjust. It takes practice, and you can do that using the same coffee, roasting back to back to back. So I would encourage you to give that a try. So now I want to share a little bit about the experience that I had roasting all this coffee and what I learned here on my roaster. I'm going to share with you a couple of profiles, and first I'm going to show you the one profile with the other one in the background. And you can see by looking at this how it's not exactly the same. I was looking at somebody's profile, I think it was off of a Bullet, and it followed the line really close. It did a really great job of following the profile. In a manual mode, when you look at this overlay, you'll see that there are some variations, but first I want you to notice the percentages of the phases. So I'm going to show both of these as separate roasts, and notice that they are within 0.5% of each other and within just a degree or so of each other, and then the total roast time is even within just a couple of seconds. So the overall roast from one roast to the next is pretty close, and it's not going to have much of a difference in flavor based on how this roast went. I'm just looking over at the graph now. You guys can take a look at it on the screen. Most of our roasts were between 5 minutes, like 4:55 and 5:10 for the dry phase. They were about 46 to 47%. The browning phase, the middle phase, was about 4 minutes, about 36 or 37% on almost every roast. And the development was usually between 16 and 17% of the roast time as well. The total roast time was close to 11 minutes on a lot of the roasts. Some went a little longer, some were a little shorter, but they were all pretty close to this. So you look at these separately, and you can see the percentage differences. And then again, here you'll see the overlay. And there are some differences. This one, I didn't just start searching for the two closest profiles, but you'll see there are some differences here. And I want to talk about those differences for a second. The one thing I haven't mentioned is that the weekend that we roasted this coffee, we had a really windy weekend. We had gusts up to 40 miles an hour. So if you take a look at the red line, that's the exhaust temperature. You'll see some waviness, and every one of those wavy events that you see on the red line, I'm talking about the little bumps, not the big change between dry end and browning. You'll notice those bumps, that's wind. Every time wind was pushing, forcing kind of back pressure on the venting system, and it played havoc with the rate of rise. So you look at the rate of rise and you'll see some wobbling going on, and that's the effect of wind. I had, not all of it's the effect of wind, but some of it's the effect of wind. I have a kind of like a barrier around where my vent goes outside to block the wind, but it was just so windy that, we had this effect that happened. The other thing I want to point out related to the exhaust temperature is you'll notice that I have a point in the browning phase where the red line is fairly flat, and there is this whole thing that happens, and we really haven't talked about it much, but as the coffee loses moisture, it starts to take on heat more. The roast is going to progress faster. And so normally you're going to be dropping your temperature as you progress through the roast. Some roasters just do it a couple of times. Others may do it more than that, depending upon the machine you're using and how that works with your environment, what's going on, and how much coffee you're actually roasting as well. But I found myself roasting using the exhaust temperature. I found that I would watch the exhaust temperature and try to have that follow the background line more than I would try to chase the rate of rise, because there's a correlation between the two. So that was one thing that really started to hit me was, okay, for those that have the ability to monitor their exhaust temperature, that's another indicator for you to watch and follow that's going to help you stay on track. All right, before I forget, I do watch my event times very carefully. One event that I haven't mentioned, and it's really important, is the turning point. And a lot of people don't talk about that too much, but turning point is an indicator for me, helping me anticipate and understand where I'm at in my dry phase anticipation for my dry phase time. So if I know that my normal time to hit turning point on these roasts, roast after roast after roast, is, as the graph shows here, 268.8 degrees and 1 minute and 30 seconds. And then the next time I do this, I'm at 1 minute and 50 seconds and 248 degrees. Then I know that I'm way behind on where I need to be. And so I'm going to need to increase my energy to try to help catch up. Now, the reason why there might have been such a big disparity is because either my amount of coffee I'm roasting has changed, the charge temperature, the bean temperature, is different than it's been in the past, or my exhaust temperature was different. Now take a look at the two exhaust temperatures here. I'm showing you this graph intentionally and pointing this out because I had a charge temperature that was a lot higher on this roast than our other roasts. Our target was about 425 degrees, and in this case, it was closer to 445 degrees. And so I had to compensate the soak time to be able to make sure that I didn't go too hot and I didn't go too fast with my rate of rise. So if you take a close look, you'll see the bean temperature slope and the turning point is off just a little bit, but it's not too far off. But if you look at the rate of rise, because I compensated a little bit, I gave a little more time for the soak, maybe it was 5 seconds or 10 seconds longer, then I was able to have my rate of rise be almost exactly the same at the same time. So by looking at turning point, you can anticipate some of these things by looking at your exhaust temperature and seeing differences. You can make adjustments so that by the time you get to turning point, you'll be back on track. So my question to you is, have any of you done production style roasting before? And what was your experience? What are the things that you learned from production style roasting? I'm interested in this because I know that I'm going to be doing more of this. Well, I'm glad that I had this experience with production roasting for this friend that we know. The client was extremely happy. We're anxiously waiting to hear what the people that received the gifts, what they thought of the coffee. We're sure it's going to be a good experience because we know that the client had already tasted the coffee and was very excited about it. And so I would encourage you to do the same. Do some production style roasting. Share your coffee with other people. Get feedback from them so that you can learn. You can learn how to improve your roasts. You can learn more about your equipment, its capabilities. If this video was helpful, I would encourage you to hit the like button and also subscribe to this channel. I've got a lot of people that are watching this channel, watching the videos that I put out, and I would really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot if you subscribe. Share the video with other people, other home coffee roasters. If you find that it's been helpful and you have questions, leave comments, ask your questions, or share your production coffee roasting experiences. I look forward to hearing back from you on that. We'll see you the next time here at the Virtual Coffee Lab, and I hope you have a great week roasting.